welcome back to yet again another top 5. I finally decided to spring up again after all my time off between school and general computer issues. I honestly have no clue which one has been worse at this point. So I figured since it's so close to Christmas, why not recap this year before we finally close it out and prepare for the beginning of 2015. So with that, I present you with my top 5 games of 2014. You know, I was very skeptical about Infamous Second Son prior to release. All the footage we have been seeing had been either pre-rendered scenes or basically non-gameplay, and while that is perfectly acceptable, in fact, I almost encourage it for teasers and any type of non-gameplay trailers, because that's just something that you should do. There was almost no gameplay to judge off of, and the gameplay that we seen was really hard to say if it was really gameplay or not, or if it was just some kind of edited CG to make it look like it was gameplay. But I'd be lying if I said this wasn't one of my favorite titles when it finally launched. While Infamous Second Son was no longer a launch title for the PS4, it was the first game I got for my PS4, so naturally I would end up playing it for a long time. Eventually I ended up playing it daily, so much so that I was getting backtracked just trying to clear out all the extra side missions, even the paper trail missions, which really were just sort of a companion-based mini-app game that was off of the website. It didn't really do much for the story, but it gave a little bit more background of how things really came to be at the end of the game. I haven't been so emotionally connected with the character since Eleanor, but the storytelling, atmosphere, gameplay, and sound design just continued to pull me back into the world of the game. I played the game to death, and I don't really regret doing so when they announced First Light as an addition to the backstory of Fetch, who arguably, as well as the rest of the conduits you come across in the game, should have gotten a little bit more screen time and development, this was almost a no-brainer instant pre-order for me. Overall, the game kept my interest for longer than I expected it to, and if I could talk about this game forever, I would, but I won't. So, let's move on before I continue to do so. There's not many games in which the main protagonists have left such an impression on me that I could recognize them in the middle of a million other characters, but BJ Blazkowicz does that, and while I may not know how to spell that, I know how to show that. Wolfenstein takes place in a neo-Nazi era in which Nazi Germany has been riddled with newfangled technology and soldiers decked out in all kinds of crazy gear. While the dogs may be terrifying the first time that you get your arms nommed off and you have no clue that the game is indicating to you to stab until that thing is dead, I will say that the rest of the game, from shooting to stabbing to sneaking to overall, well, wrecking everything's faces off, just felt so good. I typically am not all too invested into shooters these days after my old Gears of War and Call of Duty competitive days, but I couldn't really find anything wrong with this game. I mean, I've seen complaints ranging from people saying, oh, you know, I don't like this character, he sucks, he needs more emotions, to this game is too long and I hate it. Normal people who fall in the middle and can recognize a good game when they see it will mostly tell you that this game just feels good after everything that you do and basically after every single kill. The story may not hold many people, but personally, people can be very annoying, and I did not want to play this game when other people were around me, just because I didn't want to miss any of the story. And one of the times that I really only wasn't enjoying the story that much probably stemmed from playing the game on the highest difficulty, which is very unforgiving to say the least. But all of the shielded enemies towards the end of the game with basically one-shot missiles was slowly filling my soul with a lot of hatred. Wolfenstein stayed true to its difficulty roots, even incorporating a PTSD nightmare in your home base, which was really just a return to classic Wolfenstein, but it still felt pretty good and refreshing as a takeaway from all of the typical modern day too serious for you shooter shenanigans. I've been waiting for a new good Lord of the Rings game since Lord of the Rings The Third Age all the way back on the GameCube. Now while this and none of the other games thereafter were RPG games anymore, I was really looking for a game that had a practical story that was coherent and stayed true to its lore. This game did the opposite of that, so much so that they actually dropped the name of the Lord of the Rings because they didn't want people to think that the story was canon because they made up a whole new one in the same universe. This is obvious in the first cutscene when you notice that Sauron is back again, while a lot of people attempt to downplay this game as merely a reskin of the Batman Arkham series. That would only be so if the hit list in Arkham Origins actually had an impact on the story, which it actually didn't. It just kind of did nothing other than set you a list of characters that you were going to be fighting eventually. One of the things that keeps me coming back to this game, while I enjoy the story, the gameplay itself overshadows the entire story, so much so that it leaves a lot of players forgetting that it even exists because of how much fun you're having doing literally every other thing in the game in the general free roam. The entire Nemesis system could be talked about in an entire video itself, but the one thing that keeps me going in this game is how conversational the orcs are. They're rude, funny, stupid, crazy, homicidal, suicidal, and any other kind of personality you can think of. It gets to the point that when they're talking to me, that I legitimately talk back to them. Unfortunately, they can't hear me, so then I look like the crazy one. But taking on war chiefs can be a serious task, and you want to pick your battles because you can and will get wrecked for going in unprepared. Shadow of Mordor contains what few other free-roaming games have, and that is consistent new engagements that may or may not end how you expected it. And this is where the game shines. Being ambushed by 4 war chiefs is never fun, unless you take their heads with you. Now, I've covered this game a bit on my channel, but I didn't revisit it, which I truly regret. The Wolf Among Us was simply put an amazing and engaging story. From the demo to the final release, I was on edge for every episode, and I hated when there was a cliffhanger. As with typical Telltale games, the story is told in a pick-your-own-path game style. The narrative is based off of the old Fable comic books by DC. While I only ever owned one issue a long time ago and can't correlate that story to this one, there's almost never a dull moment. And when there is, you hate it because you know something's going to happen. It's almost basically inevitable. The action never stops, and that's really what keeps this story being so engaging. Playing as Bigby Wolf, you can either stay true to your form and be the badass, I'm gonna wreck your shit sheriff, or you can be kind and try to show everyone just that you're like them. Spoilers, you're not. While as most games in this fashion, such as other Telltale games, Dragon Age, or the Mass Effect series, there will always be choices that will be worded differently than acted in the actual game that'll make you just basically pissed off, and there's nothing that you can do about that but roll with it. But I think that that's all part of the fun. Fabletown is a tough place and you're the sheriff. It's up to you to create your own order within the society, and at the end of the day, no matter what, you're still the biggest and baddest there, so your decision must be final. I've seen complaints about this game being heavy on quick time events and talking sequences, but what more do you really honestly want from this game? A gun? Do you want some perks with that as well? How about some Mountain Dew and game fuel? Shoutouts to Doritos Pope. I'm solely reviewing the whole package as The Last of Us Remastered. While I'd love to play the game back on the PS3, I knew a PS4 release was almost inevitable, as the graphical fidelity of this game simply begged for it. And while there aren't any next-gen gimmicks or anything like that, with motion controls and stuff like that, or crazy touchpad actions, the experience felt complete and final with the remastered version. Prior to buying The Last of Us, I watched some of the Naughty Dog documentaries of the behind the scenes of not only the story, but some of the things that were put into the game, like the character designs for the enemies, some of the menu designs, and even functionality all the way back to how the opening sequence to the game was made. And while this mostly interested me as a developer, this gave me a much greater anchor to the story and allowed me to appreciate the story itself. and gave me something to look for in various parts of the story as I went to go play it myself. The story itself is fantastic, along with the facial animations, which really pulls a lot of the emotions to you. While the enemies may have been some of the most annoying I've dealt with in a while, it's hard to stay mad at them for a while. You know, you just keep coming back for more and fighting more of them over and over again and dying, and then the cycle continues over and over again. But that's all a part of the fun of the game, and that's kind of what kept me interested for a good amount of time. The secondary DLC that gives you a little bit more insight on who Ellie was just prior to the outbreak, the incident, also added another layer of depth on top of the entire story. This was Game of the Year for me, and while I may not have gotten the chance to beat this multiple times over, it was such a good story that I completed all the way through, including the DLC, in one sitting, which I pretty much never do, even with shorter games. The Last of Us brought with it a fantastic experience of desperation and struggle, as well as the need to survive from an imminent threat that was much stronger than you and your team. The multiplayer aspect of this game still felt connected as well, but I have my differences with that mode, as there are still players that will ruin the experience for you, which I do not factor into my review. Overall, I think it was a fantastic game with an impacting story, solid gameplay, and characters, as well as great sound design and level design, which can actually be kind of hard to find at times these days. So I applaud Naughty Dog on that. Hopefully you guys stick through for this entire thing. I know it got a little bit kind of slow towards the end, but I had a couple of issues that I had to deal with, so sorry about that. But if you did stick through and you enjoyed this series and you've watched a couple of these other series, I'd like it if you would, you know, let me know how I've done so far, and tell me if you like this series, if you want me to keep on going with it, because I really enjoyed doing this series myself. So let me know, and yeah, so Merry Christmas, and I will probably see you guys maybe with another video. I don't know, we'll have to see, but I should be back sooner than last time this time. See ya.